RogueCon 23. That's right. It is here. It's not back. It's here. It's the first one. Join the ultimate celebration of digital content with its creators, passionate fans, and industry experts. It is all happening in downtown Waco across multiple venues, January 20th through the 22nd of 2023. Now, if you want to go, you got to get tickets, and tickets are on sale at RogueCon23.com. That's RogueCon, RogueCon 23.com. Be there. I'm going to be there. Everybody's going to be there. Let's go. Coming up on the Payoff, Marin Nelson is 15 years sober, but most importantly, she's an agent of change as far as sobriety is concerned. At least I see that as being so important. She talked with us today about the fact that she started up a network called SoberForce. It is within a Fortune 500 company called Salesforce. And over the pandemic, she and a couple other sober coworkers provided a space for other coworkers to come and talk about sobriety, whether they were sober or not, and all kinds of other addictions too. They created a safe space on a corporate level, which, as far as I'm concerned, is pretty much unheard of. They had the framework in place because of other initiatives that their company had put together. So they used that to create this group called SoberForce. We get into that, but we also talk about Marin's story. 15 years sober, 12-step, just unbelievable recovery. I got linked up with her because my friend Connor Marsden, a great friend of mine who I know through Richmond football, he heard this podcast and he said, I've got a woman you got to talk to that I work with. And I owed Connor because I crashed 2 of his cars in college. And I linked up with Marin, and it was well worth it. Worth it for me, worth it for you. So first, this guy's new album is coming out, and this is a song from his new album. Kevin Sousa.
Going to a quiet spot.
Oh, there we go. Marin, what's happening?
Hi.
So the only other person that you are going to be able to hear is Mike. Mike, say hi.
Hey, how you doing?
That's Mike.
Oh, hey, Mike.
Mike's our producer. So it's just you, myself, and Mike.
I love it.
Are you in Minneapolis right now?
I live on a farm, actually.
Oh, you live on a
Afton,
farm?
Minnesota. Yeah, we moved to a farm during COVID.
So
to survive.
What part of Minnesota?
To survive with all the children and pets.
Yeah.
We live in, it's called Afton. It's like 20 minutes outside of St. Paul.
Okay.
So it's not far. That's the beauty of Minnesota. You can be 20 minutes outside of the state capital and live on 7 acres with lots of trees. It's beautiful.
And you grew up in Minnesota your whole life?
I did. I grew up in St. Paul.
Okay. Where'd you go to high school?
St. Paul Academy.
Okay.
All the way through 2nd through 12th grade. Yep. My kids are just starting their journey out here. It's a whole new world. They're in Montessori. I don't know anything about it, but I'm learning. I'm learning about why we polish silver. Why are we doing this? Tell me again. We're paying money to polish. Okay, got it.
Just go with the flow.
You don't ask questions. I think it's a scam. I think they're making money for the nearest country club. Polishing silver, collecting golf. No, I'm kidding. It's a great school. They love it.
What about high school? When you grew up, I guess I want to ask, when was the first time you drank?
Oh, when I was 14.
Okay. What happened?
14. It was a Zima. It was before, or no, it was right after diving practice. I was on the diving team. Yeah, super, super awesome, hot story. Yeah, no, it was in a parking lot of a park. There was a Zima, and it was a girlfriend, and that was it. But I remember, as any good alcoholic would, I remember the moment being like, oh, this like quiets down the voice in my head. This is nice. There you go. And then it was, go ahead.
No, what happened to you after you drank, as far as how did you notice your mind change? I always tell people subconsciously my motives changed. From the moment I drank alcohol, it became the motivating factor in most, if not all, the rest of
Yes,
my life. But I didn't even
yes,
know it. I was just moving towards my next drink the whole time.
100%. Yes. Uh, yeah. Well, it quieted the hamster down. I felt like I always had a hamster on a wheel, and I was I had anxiety pretty early, undiagnosed until my adult life, but definitely had anxiety from like earliest moments. And so it was that first moment of quiet and calm that I felt. And so that feeling is what I was chasing from there on forward.
Did you have alcoholism in your family?
Oh gosh, yes. Yes. My dad has been sober for 33 years in a 12-step program, still super active in his recovery program. His two older brothers, my uncles, sober even longer. So I am very lucky that I had an example in my immediate family and my extended family of sobriety. And I also had a really good example of active alcoholism and what that looked like. And that's a big part of my story is that there was no intervention, but it was really clear to me what a sober alcoholic versus a drunk alcoholic looks like. And the prospect of not having alcohol in my life was pretty terrifying, but the prospect of having a drunk alcoholic life was more terrifying. And I'm really grateful that I had that example of both. I mean, it breaks my heart too for that family member, but like it helped save me, I'm sure, years of pain and suffering.
Well, let's go backwards. You grew up. I'm assuming your father was sober for most of what you can remember.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, since I was 7. Yeah.
Did
And I
you?
never saw him drunk. He was like, he was like sipping drinks. So he was trying to do it on his own. He's white knuckling it for my whole life. And then it wasn't until I was 7 that he actually started a 12-step program because that path wasn't working.
So he started in the 12-step program, and was your father an attractive guy to be around?
Very much so. Yes, he still is. He's got a huge network. he's me times 2, I'd say. He's very gregarious, outgoing, super successful career, huge member of the community, served on lots of nonprofit boards, funny guy. I mean, he's someone that people want to be around. We joke that he's the mayor of the Twin Cities. And he's a, and it's an example of like what a sober life can look like. Because there's no way that would be how he would be in this world at 73 years old now.
What did they say to
drinking.
you? What did they say to you as you were growing older about alcoholism and about getting sober? Was there any message there, or was it kind of promotion by attraction?
Well, it was attraction for sure. I'm grateful for that because I think I would have resisted sobriety a lot longer if there had been any sort of push on me. But my dad definitely carried around the quiz of like, do you have a drinking problem? And then resources on the back. So like he definitely busted that out to each of us at some point. I'm sure, maybe not my sister, but the rest of us, I think he busted that out. The message was always, we have a family disease. It's a family disease. Alcoholism is a family disease. My dad's parents both had drinking problems, never had sobriety. And I actually didn't meet my grandma died before I was born. My grandpa died when I was 1 on my dad's side. And so it was like, hey, this is just a fact of our genetic makeup. And it's could be in you, maybe not, but like, here are the things to watch for. And then what really he did was demonstrated what it means to have a sober life and his commitment to his 12-step program and that community. And we would do service work every Thanksgiving with his 12-step group. We'd go serve food at a restaurant to underserved population. And so I got to see by being around these amazing people, like what a sober alcoholic looks like. Someone who works a program or has some sort of spiritual life.
Yeah,
It's about service.
I love how you're saying, because what I'm hearing is a guy who's constantly around people and is of service and is part of, I like when you said network. That's such an attractive thing about sobriety and 12 steps is that I got off, I was on a meeting last night and I got off and I was like, it was so great to just be I felt like, because it had been a little while since I've really gotten connected, a couple weeks. And I was like, gosh, that's right. I'm a part of this thing. Like it really is. And to me, it's like, we're a bunch of outlaws. And you don't really, it's not, you don't get sober and like straighten up, you get sober and you get well, if you do the right stuff. But I just felt fulfilled. And it reminded me, it was like, oh yeah, that's right. I'm a part of something. I'm a part of this huge positive network. And it's, that's the kind of stuff. And it gives me, and the feeling I got is the feeling that alcohol and drugs used to give me. But you let me talk about me. We'll be here all day. So back to you.
No, I love it. No, but you're exactly right. The connection that I thought I got from drugs and alcohol, but I didn't. It was like, it was false. It was fake. It was not authentic connection.
Well,
now I have that.
And that authentic connection is just, it's hard to even describe.
Yeah, for sure. Especially when you've been someone who has mental health stuff from an early age, that ability to connect with myself just as I am, that took a long time. And that's okay. I'm not someone who wishes I was anything other than I am, which is a gift of sobriety.
Yeah,
I don't wish that I wasn't an alcoholic, because like you, I get to go to these meetings and feel connected and have a community who loves me just as I am, and an opportunity every day to show up in service and to have it be progress, not perfection. And that is something I genuinely have arrived at a place. And it doesn't mean I don't still have struggles. Of course I do. And of course I fall into perfectionist mode and have to come back out of that, which usually means being a service to someone else, to then get connected, to then remember what my primary purpose is, to then put everything else in perspective.
Yeah.
But that I get to even be on that journey is such a gift. It's such a gift. So I don't, yeah.
But back to your journey. So you drank a little bit when you're 14. How does high school play out? How does it evolve?
So I was, because I was so acutely aware that this is a family disease, I was very much the alcoholic. And not to say that someone knowing that therefore stops them from being a complete disaster. But I was the kind of alcoholic that could hold it together for my outside image and play the part and look the part, while inside I became more and more messy over the years. And so for me, in high school, I hung with the kids who drank, like ninth grade, lost all my friends end of the year, in like a very classic dramatic high school, 14 years old, like all friends abandoned, just super dramatic. And that was definitely on my fourth step. And, but luckily made this whole new group of friends who are still my best friends today. It's actually pretty remarkable. I have 5-year-old twins, and just had them and their kids over, and we don't take it for granted. I'm gratitude is my primary value, and saying to each other, how incredible is this that we still choose to be together, and our husbands choose to be together, and our kids choose to be together, 30 years later. Pretty remarkable. Anyways, so I came back together with my elementary school age friends in 10th grade, and they didn't drink. So that actually, I white knuckled it for about a year and a half until that crew started experimenting with alcohol.
You had to wait it out.
Which I was so grateful for. I was like, thank God. But I was captain of the swimming and diving team, and I was varsity gymnastics in middle school and I had really good grades, and I went to a private school. I had the outside stuff looked really good. And I went to a really good school, but I definitely picked Madison because they drink a lot, and they knew that. And I was like, yep, that's my place. That's where I'm good. Great academics, but also huge party school.
So University of Wisconsin.
Yeah.
Okay.
And, but again, I managed my boyfriend in college was pre-med, so that kept me at the library. Means I had a really good GPA. If I wanted to see him, I had to go to the library. But it didn't take long. I moved to New York after I graduated and bottomed out at 24, just after my 24th birthday. So I drank for 10 years.
What happened?
That's all I needed.
Yeah, some people don't even need that long. I mean, a fraction of that. What happened? How did you bottom out?
nothing remarkable. It literally was just like sick and tired of being sick and tired. And at the very end, I felt pretty suicidal. And I would think about, what would happen if I just, jumped in front of the subway, which just like breaks my heart to even say it out loud that I was that low. But I just didn't know how to stop. I couldn't stop. It's like it was a great day, I drank. It was a terrible, I drank. I couldn't not drink. And I spent the day obsessing over where was I going to drink, with whom, how many hours could I get in before I need to go to sleep to get back up, to get to work. And again, the outside stuff looked good. I had a boyfriend. My rent was paid. I was, 20-something living in New York City. I moved out there on my own, figured it out, got a job, got a place. But I felt like I was holding on to my life by my fingernails. Like I could feel that I was like right on the cusp of like losing everything. And I was starting to do things that I said I never do, like drink in the morning or smoke a joint before going to work.
Yeah.
And I knew that I couldn't keep it up much longer. I started getting called out by family members, like my sister, 6 months before I got sober, was like, basically said I seemed a lot like this family member who was still drinking alcoholically. And I was furious. But I'm grateful to her, and I thank her for that, because she planted the seed that said, like, hey, guess what? I see you. You're not hiding this so well anymore. I can see what's happening.
No matter how much you think you have your shit together, on paper or on the outside, yeah.
So, and because I lived in New York and my family was elsewhere, like I could somehow hold it together. But I remember, the last time my parents visited before I got sober, like, oh, it's just so dramatic, and I was so angry, and I, showed up high, and they, I don't know if they knew or didn't know, but like left the dinner in a big huff, and they need to go get drunk. And so I had enough, I guess, awareness and an example of what it could look like. And a moment of grace really was my bottom, was like this moment of grace after a really long birthday hangover and yet another night of not knowing how I'd gotten myself into a situation and not remembering parts of the night, and waking up just feeling completely terrified, just like to my core, terrified that I was going to do something that was going to kill me. And closing my eyes, and I'd read somewhere my birthday that year was on May 5th. So May 5th, my birthday's always May 5th, but it was 5/5/5 that year. It's May 5th, 2005. And I read that it was, my wish day was May 8th. Whatever a wish day is, I have no idea. I found some random website, and I was like, cool, wish day. What's that? Tell me more. And it said, those of you born on May 5th are in a downward spiral and need to wish for clarity. And I was like, ooh, that resonates. And so I woke up that morning horribly hungover again, and standing in my kitchen in Brooklyn, and I closed my eyes and I said, okay, I need clarity. And I saw myself standing at the fork in the road, and at the one end of the road on the left was my dad and my uncles, and on the other end of the other fork of the road was this family member who's drunk. And I heard very loudly in my head, pick your path.
Wow.
And it gives me goosebumps still. It's like, that moment, that was my moment of grace. And I picked up the phone and I called my parents. It was Mother's Day. And that makes me tear up because my mom passed away last year. But I said, happy Mother's Day. I think I have a problem. I think I have a drinking problem. And she's like, oh, okay, I love you. I'm going to give the phone to your dad. This is his area. This is his area of expertise. Hold on. They're like at a country club having a loud brunch. And my sweet dad got on the phone and he said, okay, you need to call your cousin. I had a cousin in New York who's sober, and you need to look up Intergroup and find a meeting and go to a meeting and call me later.
Oh, your dad was, he been waiting on that call, right?
Maybe. I don't know. He never said to me, like, I knew you were an alcoholic. I think I hit it pretty well. I mean, maybe, but not like, and it wouldn't have been much longer that I would have been able to really hold it together. But living in New York and my parents being in Minnesota, I was pretty well aware that they would be looking for a problem, That's how I felt. Like everyone's got their eyes on me. I better play this pretty. And I think that.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
That's probably. I just think that's true for a lot of people, and that's the group of people that I hope to reach today. Is the people who have the job, have the marriage, have the kids, have the things, look like they're okay, but inside they're terribly depressed, full of shame, remorse, can't figure out how to stop drinking. And to be able to say to them, like, guess what? Like, alcoholics look like us too.
Yeah.
Like, this is a low enough bottom. How you feel and how much you hate yourself, like, that's low enough. You don't need to go any lower. There's another way to live.
If you could describe what was going on inside you internally, like, you know, the spiritual sickness and the brokenness, how would you say it?
Oh, it just makes me so sad to even think about that 24-year-old self. I just felt so disconnected. I felt hollow. Like, I'd look in the mirror, and I remember this moment looking in the mirror drunk and literally seeing black holes for my eyes and being horrified. Like, I felt so disconnected from myself and my spiritual self. What was that? I had no idea how to connect with the spiritual realm. Like, my only moments of connection that I would reflect back on would be, I was a big backpacker when I was in high school. And so there was a moment in 11th grade standing at the top of a mountain in Washington State. I went on a month-long camping trip. My parents were probably like, send her away. Maybe this will get her straight. And it was a remarkable life experience. One of my like highlights in life for sure. Because of the self-confidence that came with this really hard thing I was doing of getting up every day and backpacking for miles and miles and carrying everything I needed, right? And I remember sitting on the mountaintop and feeling this connection and not wanting to lose that connection and thinking, how do I bring this back home? How do I connect with this feeling back home? Because this is what I've been looking for, is this connection. And then it was gone, you know, and it didn't come back again until I got sober. But yeah, no, how I felt was just fully disconnected.
I had a similar experience. Like, when I was in high school, we went on this a retreat. It was called Kairos, and it was a spiritual retreat. I was a football player. I was an athlete. I mean, I don't think I was like some kind of hammerhead. I thought I was a thoughtful person, but I was not into spirituality at all. And we went to this retreat, and I mean, I was sky high. I was talking about what was going on with my life. Other people were doing the same. And I came back from that retreat so energized and fulfilled. And then, of course, I went to my buddy's house on a Friday night, and we started to drink beer right away.
Exactly. Yep.
A good friend, he had taped Seinfeld for me from that week, and then we drank a couple beers. He's sober today too, so it's all good. But it's you know, that was an experience that kind of like where I think that's kind of what sobriety gives me today. But I didn't know then. You know, I felt connected. Right. And then I lost it, and I didn't get that type of connection back till I got sober. The one thing I want to go back and ask you about your father is, you know, that's kind of what this podcast is about. It's the opportunity for people to see what the other side looks like in recovery, how it is an attractive life. There's a lot of us walking around who are remaining anonymous, which is fine. It's great. But at the same time, this opens it up for people. Like, you had your dad right in front of you. And I know just from talking to you, you have a gratitude for that, but not everybody else has that. And so that is what we just kind of want to put this out there so people can see what it's like. But for you, what was it like? How important was your dad's sobriety as far as you managing to come out of the darkness at 24 as opposed to 44?
Oh my gosh. I mean, yeah, exactly. I mean, it saved me my life. I don't know that I would have made it. Like, I think I probably would have taken my own life. I mean, I don't know. It's a terrible thing to even think about, but like, I was so desperate, and I was so unwilling to really let it all fall apart, even though it was, and I didn't have any control of my alcoholism. The progressive disease, it was getting worse. I mean, it just saved me so many years of pain. And yet when I walked into the room, you know, I also had used it as a barrier, because I'd say like, oh, that's an old white man thing. Yeah. I'm 20 something. I live in New York City. Like, that is not my crew. And then I walked into the first room in Brooklyn to my, actually Manhattan was my first meeting. And it was all people of all different ages, and some were my age, and hearing their stories and thinking, these people what's wrong with these people that they're so happy? Why is anyone this happy about being an alcoholic? What's wrong with you? I think something's wrong. And then I watched the basket get passed around, and I was like, someone's got to steal from this basket. There's no way that no one's taking from this basket.
For those of you who don't know, at meetings, they'll pass around the basket and,
Pays for coffee, pays for rent.
Yeah.
Pays for literature. Yeah, so I didn't see anyone take any money. And, but I also felt so inspired by people's courage and bravery and authenticity and willingness to share themselves fully with a room of strangers. And I was like fascinated by it and envious, judgmental. I mean, I was like all the feelings in that first meeting. But I wanted that joy that they seemed to have, or at least that some of them seemed to have. And that laughter. I remember the laughter standing out to me and being like, this realization of like, oh, I don't think I've laughed not high or drunk in a really long time.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, my dad's example showed me like what he showed me was this is how you maintain your sobriety, and that's the piece. It's not just the not drinking, because I didn't have a drunk dad to compare to, right? Like he was always sober in the sense that like how he stayed sober shifted when I was 7, but like he had always been a sober dad. So what he showed me though was like this takes work and consistency and community and the principle of service and gratitude and not being perfect and not out recruiting members, attraction, not promotion, like just showing up as a solid person. And when it makes sense to share my sobriety, he'd share sobriety with someone, but he wasn't like out sharing it all over the place. But he was just consistent. He's a consistent, loving presence. And so I had that as my example. And I knew I wanted to be that, and I knew I was becoming less of that the more I drank.
Although it's been 20 years since the events of 9/11, many of us can still remember it like it was yesterday. America, and the world even, has never been the same. From Rafaelion Media, the King of the World podcast series explores the many repercussions of that day for the American Muslim community through the journey of host Shahjahan Khan, a high school senior at the time. Shahjahan's story is something our listeners will respond to. Throughout much of his young adult life, he found himself abusing drugs and alcohol as he struggled with his mental health and his identity as a Muslim in this new America post 9/11. King of the World is his story, told in 7 parts. You'll learn about his struggle with sobriety and belonging alongside the major headlines of the last 20 years. Written and produced by American Muslims, King of the World is a sometimes comical, often heartbreaking examination of adversity that all Americans need to hear. Subscribe now to King of the World wherever you get your podcasts.
RogueCon 23. That's right. It is here. It's not back. It's here. It's the first one. Join the ultimate celebration of digital content with its creators, passionate fans, and industry experts. It is all happening in downtown Waco across multiple venues, January 20th through the 22nd of 2023. Now, if you want to go, you got to get tickets, and tickets are on sale at RogueCon23.com. That's RogueCon, RogueCon 23.com. Be there. I'm going to be there. Everybody's going to be there. Let's go.
Hi, I'm Hank. You might remember me from a show called King of the Hill. Check out a King of the Hill rewatch podcast. These boys ain't rap, but they are funny. Find the podcast anywhere you get your podcasts or at roguemedianetwork.com. I tell you what.
What started to happen to you when you got sober? When you started, like, how did your meeting situation go? How did your sobriety go? Talk to me about that.
I was really scared to be alone, so I'd go to work. I worked in nonprofit healthcare then. So I'd go to work, and then I'd go to meet up with someone for coffee, usually my sponsor. And then I'd go to a meeting, and then I'd go out to dinner after. And then I'd go to coffee after that. And I basically would do, I heard be in the middle of the pack. Don't be on the outside of the pack or you get picked off by the wolves. And the wolves are your disease. Like, stay in the middle of the pack. So I really stayed in the middle of the pack. And I'm super grateful for where I got sober, because I'd show up at meetings with like 200 20-something-year-olds. It's just crazy.
Yeah.
I don't know how many other places, maybe Los Angeles has that vibe too, but like Brooklyn was a pretty awesome place to get sober at 24, because I learned how to be in the world and go out dancing in these environments where there's alcohol, but I was like surrounded by like 20 to 30 sober people. So I learned how to be safe in these like real life places.
Was it hard to get sober that young?
It would have been harder to keep drinking. No, I don't think. I mean, no, because I was so miserable. No, it was a relief. I felt relief pretty quick. I didn't have an experience where I felt like I was white knuckling it. Like I very much had a very pink cloud experience. Everything felt so much lighter and easier and invigorating, and like I was addicted to the authenticity and the just showing up however I was and being accepted. And there was an energy of that group that I got sober with.
How did you work how did your life start to improve?
Oh, well, I stopped hating myself. I mean, I suppose that is a journey, but I started feeling purpose and value in even my darkest stories. That like when I started helping other women and seeing that my stories, my darkness could actually be the thing that helped them, because it showed them that like, you'll be okay too. If you just don't drink and you stay connected, it will be okay. It maybe doesn't feel okay right now, but it will be okay. Was a huge dramatic shift. And that I started being able to show up fully at work, and I was so supported at work, which was really, really critical to my sobriety, that I felt safe enough at work to share that I was getting sober, and had such loving support from my leadership team, which is something hopefully we'll get to that I am trying to do in my workplace today.
Yeah.
Right. And so that made a huge difference, because I felt like I could be my full self at work.
Well, I mean, I got to imagine that's quite a peace of mind, but that's quite a door to walk through, to have the courage to tell your employer, especially somebody like you. Like for me, when I got sober, I mean, everybody knew. Like they were like, they were really,
thank God.
Yeah. I mean, if I showed up and I, didn't look completely twisted, somebody was like, hey, what's up with you? Like, what, like it was good. And so I got sober. People knew. I could tell everybody. It was kind of easier for me to, I don't know easier, but.
How old were you when you got sober?
Well, I got sober when I was 33, and I had like some successes and some things going in my life, but I just blew them all up, at the mercy, because I was at the mercy of alcohol and drugs. But so when I got sober, everybody was psyched. Somebody like you, who, a lot of people probably didn't know that you had a drinking problem. Was that totally fulfilling? I would imagine it was, to go walk in and tell your employer and to get a positive reaction.
I was terrified. Are you kidding? I was shaking. I was like, I was going to throw up. But for me, when I got sober, I felt like I had to tell everyone in my life and in my world that I was doing this thing to hold myself accountable to it. Like that was my approach. That doesn't work for everyone. That's not even necessarily a safe choice for everyone. But for me, that was how I held myself accountable, was by telling all of my friends, my roommate, my family, my work. So that, God forbid, if I were to pick up a drink, then everyone would say, hey, that's not a good idea. Or, do you need to talk, or do you need to go to treatment? Or, I wanted a layer of accountability on my behavior. So I outed myself like all over the place. And I don't know if it was super shocking to them. I mean, I sort of hungover all the time. Maybe I would spend a lot of hours in the bathroom, just like so sick, and I should have been fired. I was totally unproductive. You think about productivity at work. I was not a productive employee.
How did you see yourself change professionally? I think that's something that I talked to friends about that. Right? Yeah.
Capacity, like my capacity. I don't know how people do. I mean, I got sober young, so I'm like, I don't know how I would have continued being employable. I probably wouldn't have been had I kept drinking. I don't know how people do that. Like I was so horribly hungover and then so distracted thinking about where I was going to go drink. So yeah, when drinking got removed, I suddenly all the space got freed up in my brain. All the space I was thinking about, what did I do last night? Who did I say what to? What do where did I screw up? How much money did I spend? Etc. And oh my gosh, where I need to get another bagel, another cup of coffee because I feel terrible. That space became free, and now I was well rested and had energy and focus, and so I was super productive. And I actually then switched careers after about a year. I just was like, I can't stay in a cube. Like my work was in a cube, and I was like, I can't do the cube life. Like it's not my personality. The work was super meaningful and important, and I'm incredibly grateful to the people in this world who do that work. But I couldn't do it. It wasn't my personality. I needed to get out and be engaged with people. So I actually went into commercial real estate in New York. I got my real estate license, and I went into commercial real estate, and then I switched to software sales when I moved back to Minnesota when I was about 3 years sober.
And that's where you are now. A couple more things before we get to what you're doing now, because what you're doing now is pretty crazy, in a good way. So yeah. So when did you meet your husband? I always find it interesting to ask people how they started, how they dated in sobriety. That was a huge thing for me. I never thought I'd be able to talk to a girl without drinking when I got sober.
It took me a long time to meet my husband. I had to go through quite a few doozies. Oh my gosh. I mean, that piece, oh please, that took a long time. Figuring out my worth, my self-worth, and that I couldn't fix anyone else, that that's not my job, that's not actually a way to be of loving service to the world, is not to show up and try to fix other people. That took me a long time. So I actually have only been married for 5 years.
Congratulations.
We met 7 years ago, and on Instagram.
I love it. Yeah.
Where all the cool kids meet today. We started liking each other's photos and met for coffee, and that was that. But no, I mean, I dated all sorts of the wrong for me. I mean, just a lot of people where it was clearly wrong, but I was like, I can fix them. I can get them sober. I can get them to treatment for whatever addiction they had, fill in the blank. I can save this person. And then it was like, I just had to get to a place where I loved myself enough to go, that's not my job. Actually, that's not I'm responsible for me. That's it. And I need to find someone where where it's just love and trust and safety and fun and connection, and like, shouldn't be this hard work thing, because it's really not. My marriage is the easiest part of my life, which I'm super grateful for.
Well, and sobriety is a huge part of your life. So now you move forward. You mentioned you get into software sales. You go back to Minneapolis, and you become really like an agent of change. How did you? So can I say where you work?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, you work at Salesforce, and you have a group there that you started, which is unlike any other as far as I'm concerned. It's called Sober Salesforce. Sober Force. And what happened? How did you get the balls to start to walk into somebody's office and say, "Hey, I want to start a recovery group at this huge corporate conglomerate"? How does that happen?
Well, luckily there was a pandemic, so there's no walking into anyone's office, virtual office. So I co-founded it with 3 other sober sales leaders. We got connected on LinkedIn. Someone had co-founder Chris Anthony, and he's on lots of podcasts about this, so I can share his name. He posted basically like a coming out of the sober closet type of post. He had never disclosed his sobriety, and he was celebrating 15 years, and he posted an article, 15 things I've learned in 15 years sober, something like that, 15 years sobriety, something like that. And excuse me, and another coworker whom I never met. So I never met any of these guys in the workplace. We all work in different divisions. Had connected and mentioned me and said, "Hey, I think you'd appreciate this." And then we all got connected on a phone call. And basically we were all long-term sobriety, like 7 to 15 years each of us, all in sales leadership at Salesforce. and had a really nice chat. And we said, we should figure out how to extend this to the broader Salesforce community, because at this point it's September of 2020. So we're in the, what at that time felt like the peak of the pandemic. Now I feel like who knows, but, ramping up towards the winter in this pandemic, pre-vaccinations, and people are really struggling. And all of us were seeing it in our own sober communities. We're not all 12-step people. So some of us have stayed sober different ways. But we all were seeing this impact of the pandemic, right? And now we have the data that confirms what we saw. The CDC last year or earlier this year released a report that said 42 million Americans reported starting or increasing substance abuse as a way of dealing with the stress of the pandemic, which is pretty horrifying.
Wow.
And then the numbers for women are even worse. I think it's like 5x. It's something really, and that one I don't know by heart, but that was pretty terrifying that I heard the other day.
So 42% of people reported that?
42 million. 42 million. I think
sorry.
it equated to 13%. 42 million Americans. Yeah.
Wow.
So massive impact this pandemic is having. No surprise, right? I mean, as an alcoholic, I think we all get it.
I know of 4 or 5 people personally who
relapse.
Been pushed, guys that have relapsed, and also people who are kind of flirting with the disease that just got pushed way over the edge by this. Yeah,
because you're home alone or whatever in an office. So the way I managed my alcoholism before I got sober was, I'm sorry, I'm going off on a little tangent here, but the way I managed managed my alcoholism to the best of my ability before I got sober was around the work hours. So when I was at work, I wasn't drinking because I was in an office and I couldn't. But you remove that, so that's a whole bunch of people who now are home all day, drinking all day. It adds stress and anxiety and depression, job losses, food insecurity, loss of loved ones. I mean, just like a recipe for addiction to thrive in. And a lot of isolation, which is really where my disease loves, is isolation. So anyway, so we said, we know that it's having a massive impact and people need help and they need community and they need to feel seen at work and safe at work. And so how can we do that? And luckily we had the framework from our Office of Equality on how to do it. And at the time, so we stood it up on Chatter, which is part of our Salesforce platform. We now have moved it to Slack. We acquired Slack.
Slack, sure.
But it's a public forum for anyone at the company to either officially join as a member or just follow along, which is intentional.
Yeah.
So we have our page public. And we set it up to be a community for sober curious, sober allies to destigmatize addiction by sharing our stories authentically with each other and to support and facilitate inclusive environments. And what I mean by that is, when there's a wine tasting, let's ask for permission if that person would like a bottle of wine or a Bite Squad gift card sent to their house, right? Or let's ensure that we have just as many, if not more, non-drinking virtual events that we're hosting for our customers and our employees as we do the wine tastings, right? I think wine tastings became like an easy default for everyone in the corporate virtual world. And so we were trying to inspire that moment of pause to say, am I creating an inclusive event for everyone or not? And it's not to say there's not a place for wine tasting. We're very careful to say, we're not the anti-drinking crew.
Yeah.
But we do want us to bring mindfulness. And mindfulness, I think, for me, comes when there's representation in the workplace. Visibility matters, right? And so let's share our stories together so that everyone feels like they can be their full selves at work and not have to hide these parts of themselves, right? And also, my hope, and I think a lot of hope of the members, is that we help someone achieve or find sobriety sooner and before they lose more, and so my hope is that we raise some people's bottom and that they can seek this help that is here for anyone who wants it sooner than later. So it's a lot of partnership with our benefits team and our HR team to ensure that these awesome benefits that Salesforce offers our employees are surfaced in a way that people can get access to them when they need them, and that we make it easy for people to take advantage of these benefits.
Are you removing the stigma, or are people still sheepish about coming out of the darkness? Because if I you know, I was a chronic relapser, right? So like if I work with you and I go and I say, hey, I got to stop drinking, and then I'm at a work function with you 2 years from now and I'm drinking or plastered, how does that work? And I'm just curious.
It's a great question. There are definitely people in our group who have struggled with relapse, and that's true for a lot of people with addiction. We are a group for everyone, so we are very encouraging. I'll answer your question too, but to get to the second part, we want allies in our group for quite a few reasons, and one of the reasons is that we don't want people to assume if you're part of this group, oh, you must be an addict in recovery, because the stigma is still real, right? And so and that then keeps people from participating. So it's like, no, we want everyone in here, including drinkers, including those who are maybe sober curious, including the people who are sober for religious reasons or for support reasons, to support a friend or a loved one who's in sobriety and they're choosing to not drink to support them, right? There's lots of reasons people choose to not drink, including just, oh, I feel better when I don't. And that's a valid reason too, right? And so we want this group to be all-inclusive, and we're pretty vocal about that. For the first part around the stigma, no, we're not going to break the stigma overnight. I wish. No. We have a long journey ahead of us. I think as a world, we have a massive drinking problem. We are really good at numbing out as humans, I'd say. And maybe it's just part of the human condition. Like, we're really good at numbing ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, it's been since the beginning of time. We've been finding ways to get out of self the wrong ways.
Right. So the stigma doesn't disappear overnight, but it is super powerful for people to see others claiming the title of, I'm an alcoholic in recovery. And that then makes it okay for someone else to say it.
Totally.
And so what's been incredibly powerful is to watch people who are counting days sober. I had 30 days sober, I had 60 days sober, and feeling safe enough to post it on Slack. And then the outpouring of support that comes from the Sober First community is just like, makes me tear up. I mean, it's amazing.
It's amazing.
Will
what you're doing
will every single one of them stay sober? I don't know.
Yeah.
Probably physically, probably not. But do they have a place to come back to that's here always? Yes.
Well, and there's a big picture. There's a big picture component to this. There are so many. Again, I was lucky that I had, the first time I went to an AA meeting, I always say it took me 10 years to get a year. I went to my first meeting ever, really when I had a problem. A buddy of mine took me, I had a problem too. A buddy of mine took me when I was like 19 because he had gotten sober and he knew that I was an alcoholic, but I wasn't really ready to go to a meeting till 2002. And then it took me till 2011, late 2011, 2012 to have a year. So, but there was so much, I guess what I'm trying to say is you just never know what's going to get you there. And there are little nuggets that were sprinkled on me along the way. And I wasn't lucky enough to have a place that I could, I had several jobs in between that first meeting and that time when I had a year, but I never was it promoted to be sober. Never was it, people, I mean, we're talking about, this is back when you got sober. I was hitting it pretty hard in like 2005, like 2006. Nobody was like, if you, for as far as I was concerned, the people at work would have looked at you cross-eyed, or you would have been, you would have been kind of like a leper. Really, I mean, well, at least not to everybody, individual people. Maybe somebody would have pulled you aside, but at least that's how I saw it. Now, people like you are creating a culture and an environment where, look, man, you got a problem. Let's handle it. Let's take care of it. Now, at that point in time, like you could go into an AA meeting, of course, at any time and be totally welcomed and loved. I'm just talking about in the workplace specifically.
Well, and to be fair, like I worked at a healthcare nonprofit, so we were there facilitating conferences for people who dedicated their lives to the HIV/AIDS population of uninsured or underinsured, New York City community members, like whatever. I mean, it was like we were talking about things that would make a lot of people squirm at that time, I guess, right? Sex education. And so it was a group that was pretty welcoming to I'd say anything around health and wellness. So I'm lucky in that regard that that's where I got sober. And then I brought my sobriety into a commercial real estate firm, which was, there was plenty of drinking happening there.
And in the sales world, there's
yeah.
a lot of drinking.
Well, exactly. And so that's a big piece of it is like, how do we, let's be real. There's a lot of drinking everywhere. So I think that yes, in sales, do we go out to dinners and do that? Yes. But the reality is there's just a lot of drinking everywhere. There's just as many people in the nonprofit world who drink. But your question of how did I get the courage to go into it? So I have a fantastic mentor. Well, I have lots of fantastic mentors, but one of my fantastic mentors is Justin McGuire, who's our executive sponsor of Soberforce, and he's our chief design officer at Salesforce. And he actually was the one who really encouraged us to formalize this group. So when we were having this conversation between the four of us, and we were talking about this idea, he was, in the background one-to-one with me saying, you guys should really do this and then let me help you. And I will happily be your executive sponsor if you want me to be, right? So that helped because it was the permission to go do this. But we also already had the framework established through the Office of Equality of how to create a group. And so I think if you are at a company where you have an employee resource group framework, where it can be employee-led and employee-created groups, that helps lessen the barrier to create these types of groups, right? Because then you have the framework and the permission to go create something, and getting an executive sponsor who's got access to power definitely helps. And then my direct leadership team, up through your friend, was also incredibly
Connor
supportive.
Marsden. So
Give him a shout out.
I was sitting. So this is a beautiful thing, right? Because this is sobriety for you. I got sober, and a lot of people knew because I had flamed out. A lot of people knew that I got sober because, I'd started to do well or okay in life, and I started, showing up for stuff, and close friends knew that I was sober. But then, of course, everybody lives their life and goes in different directions, and I'm just Pete to all my friends from college. Connor Marsden and I went to the University of Richmond. I knew Connor through the football team. And Connor was a very close friend. I lived with Connor for a while. I think I crashed Connor's car twice.
God.
Yeah.
Wow. He is forgiving.
Yeah. Oh, big time. Let's just say I wasn't sober. And so Connor is he is salt of the earth. And he called me up because of this podcast I'm doing. It was put back out there. And he was like, I didn't know, he knew I was sober, but he said, what you're doing is terrific. And I've got somebody who you've got to talk to. And so here we are today. And that is like the circle of life. And I think what you're doing is unbelievable. And now, as Connor told me, you're starting to get pinged by other, because Salesforce is a huge conglomerate. You're starting to get pinged by other major companies about this. How is that developing?
So I don't know if I can share the names only because I don't know if they've created it, but I will say that other Fortune 500 and even Fortune 100 companies have started just organically finding the story through podcasts, or Business Insider did an article and featured us, which was great. Newsweek did an article and featured us. Like, the stories start getting organically just getting out there, thanks to LinkedIn. I think, in people posting and networks and sharing, like what happened with you and Connor. Mm-hmm. And so, people are starting to reach out who are sober themselves and hearing these stories and going, I want to create this in my company too. Because the reality is people are suffering everywhere. This isn't like, it's not like alcoholics and addicts exist in one place, one realm. We're everywhere. I think they say 12.7% of the population struggles with addiction. It's a massive number.
Yeah.
So if we can make it okay to talk about it, maybe we reach someone who says, I need help sooner, right? We help to keep someone sober because they don't feel like they need to drink as part of their job. No job says that, by the way. I mean, at least definitely not at Salesforce. You could always opt out, but do you give yourself permission to opt out, or do you use it as an excuse to drink again? So it's like, let's just eliminate all these barriers, these self-imposed barriers, and make it okay to just have this conversation in the workplace to say, like, it's okay to be an alcoholic and be here. And what we're doing in turn is just making it okay for people to be human. And so people will come to me with other struggles, right? But that I feel so grateful that people trust me enough as this remote colleague they've never met in real life to tell me what's really going on in their lives. Whether it's a parent dying of cancer because I went through that journey and I shared that journey, or it's a child struggling with depression or eating disorder, right? That, like, we can we can bring our human selves to work. And it doesn't mean we are not productive and we don't do our jobs. And all of that is still true. But there's also space to be human, which for me just further connects me to my place of employment, because that isn't always the case everywhere. But if companies could figure that out, I think you'd solve a lot of retention problems.
Yeah, I can only imagine the camaraderie, because this kind of goes back to Connor, and I was fortunate enough to work in team sports, but I always found camaraderie in sports that was like unlike anything else. And I certainly was not a professional, but you talk to guys who retire, pro players, and the first thing they say they miss is the locker room, the camaraderie of the guys, or the girls on the women's side. But now I have a whole nother. I have a group now. I talked about. I have that camaraderie, and I can only imagine the camaraderie at your workplace, how it's been elevated by what you're doing. The bonds that are being formed, that has to be pretty amazing. Have you seen that at all? Have you seen the workspace improve?
I would say I definitely hear it in people's stories who feel, I say, freed, that they can share this part of themselves at work and be of service to a fellow colleague who's maybe earlier on the journey. I know I have that experience. When someone reaches out to me and says, I just got sober, I have this event, how do I opt out? And just to talk it through and share my own experience of what being a successful sober sales leader who's never picked up a drink in her sales career, and yet I've grown a sales career, right? And so even just to be able to say, like, yeah, here, I'm an example of that. Let me tell you how I did it and how I had that conversation. Brings so much meaning to work. So at a global scale, can I say the impact? Not yet. I mean, we have 330 members of our group. A lot more.
That's an impact right there. 330?
Yeah. That's pretty good for having just started.
That's pretty damn good.
That's pretty good. And we have monthly calls, and we've had 60 people join our monthly calls, and we have a way for people to call anonymously, because we're mindful that there is that stigma, and people also not beyond. So
there
the
is
stigma,
an anonymous element to it.
There's an anonymous element of just people being able to join anonymously. Awesome. We want people to get the content and not feel like they have to be outed if they're not ready, right?
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, and so your question about like people maintain their anonymity, there's also a lot of people who have reached out to me who have said, hey, I've been sober 15 years. I love what you're doing. I just don't feel comfortable like bringing that part of myself to work, but like cheering you on from the sidelines.
Yeah, I had that happen to me recently. Somebody pulled me aside and they said, I like what you're doing. I was like, that's awesome. I could care less.
Right.
Look, it's up to you whether whatever you want to do with it. Totally. Yeah.
Totally.
Mm-hmm.
Totally. Because it's not for me to say what someone else's journey is on it. For me, I feel like I can be of maximum service doing this work in this way.
How do you feel about like meeting, like, do you feel like this will go forward and this would be something where you guys, when the conditions and circumstances allow, you would be doing this in person?
I would love to. I mean, we're encouraging people to get together for coffee if they live in the same city. So we're trying to facilitate that with a phone list and locations. And I've noticed people starting to ping like, hey, is anyone going to be in around the San Francisco office? Like, let's grab coffee. So that's awesome to see. I hope that pops up in little groups. And, when we highlight in our stories, like, there isn't just one path to sobriety or one reason for sobriety. And so we try to feature all different stories. People are in our group. Most people in our group, I'd say it's around recovery from alcoholism and drug addiction, but there are definitely people in our group who are in recovery from sex addiction and gambling addiction and food addiction, and like all of those experiences are welcome.
Oh, it's all out there.
It's all out there.
Yeah.
It's mostly dominated by people in recovery from drugs and alcohol. But yeah, I hope that when we get back in person, Dreamforce this year is virtual, but our hope as a team is that we can have a sober event at Dreamforce. That's a goal that we have set for ourselves as a team. And so hopefully when that day comes back where we're all together in San Francisco, we can have a zone for our sober customers and, again, sober allies, not just you sober, but like come get coffee, come chat, where it's in a non-drinking space. Because for some people, it's not safe at all to walk in a bar. That wasn't my experience, but that's the experience of a lot of people. And so how do we, again, honor that, create space where that, you can be a part of without partaking in drinking?
Well, and really, like, you don't have to kill yourself, because it's so, and this is not like hyperbole. you and I talked on the phone before this, and the person who has to go out on a sales call where there's alcohol involved, but they think they have a problem and they don't know how to handle that. And they got nobody to talk to. So they're like, well, I just got to go on this call. And then they get drunk. And then maybe that was the window where they were going to stop drinking. And now they're just drinking forever. And then the worst happens. It doesn't have to be like that. There's avenues for people to go down. And you've created one of them. Anything else we need to know about Sober Force?
I just say if anyone is interested in creating this in their company, please do find me on LinkedIn and reach out. And we don't have anything formal to distribute yet. I hope one day we'll get there. We're still pretty new, but my hope is, and our hope is that we see other companies follow suit and have this brave conversation in the workplace. And super excited by the interest that's been expressed because, there are a lot of people who need community in the workplace, and this is a great avenue to facilitate that. So
I can put your LinkedIn when I post this. Okay, I'll attach that.
Please do.
Anything else? I'd like to ask people this question. What would you tell the person that's hanging on, just trying to get a day? What do you tell those people?
There's such an easier, softer way, and you deserve life. You deserve life. And there's a lot of us who are here to share our stories, so come find us so we can connect.
Marin, I have a feeling this won't be the last time we talk, so I'll be in touch.
Pete, thank you so much for having these conversations. It matters, so thank you for the work that you're doing.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate it, and like I said, we'll talk soon, okay?
Sounds good. Take care.
All right, bye-bye. Yeah, she was awesome. Marin, you there?
I'm still here.
Oh, yeah.
They got me to think, oh my God, what a disaster that was. Shit.
No, you were great. You were great.
Good.
Yeah. Thanks so much for listening to The Payoff with Pete. Once again, I'm Pete Souza. And of course, we are part of the Rogue Media Network. All kinds of good podcasts you can find at roguemedianetwork.com. And of course, you can find this podcast and all those other ones wherever you get your podcasts, iTunes, Spotify, other spots like that.
This has been a Rogue Media podcast.
Join the ultimate celebration of digital content with its creators, passionate fans, and industry experts. It's all happening in downtown Waco across multiple venues on January 20th through the 22nd, 2023. Tickets are on sale now at roguecon23.com.
Hi, I'm Hank. You might remember me from a show called King of the Hill. Check out a King of the Hill rewatch podcast. These boys ain't rap, but they are funny. Find the podcast anywhere you get your podcasts or at roguemedianetwork.com. I tell you what.